Welcome to another episode of shooting giant robots that I hope I never see in real life. In today's video, we are shooting a giant robot that I hope I never see in real life with Hailey. So you can see here we get a nice run, did 100 million damage on Gluttony. Pretty fast run, not anything too crazy. But the run that got away from me was this run right here, where I did 120 million damage. I did 126 out of the 144. Both of these runs I had Walker Tightrope on, and I also had a Eugen, so I didn't have Walker Tightrope on. We're going to be looking at the solo snipe build, the group snipe build, as well as the overall gun build, which I find to be pretty fun. For those that are new to Hailey, I'll cover this real quick. The descriptions seem pretty good. Doesn't seem like there's any mistranslations or anything that's going to end up, changing later, and we get a dev note about. But the first ability, Cryo Round, when you end up shooting it out, it allows you to apply a debuff to the enemy, where you're going to deal an additional 50% damage for 9 stacks. So each shot that you do is going to end up removing a stack of the good old Cryo Round. Second ability, Storm Snare. This is going to be your big old shot. This combined with Dangerous Ambush is going to allow you to hit big numbers because this has a 8,000% skill power modifier. Cold Fury, which is pretty much the start of the show when we are looking at the gun build. When you apply this, it's going to continually drain your mana, but it's not too big of a drain. And you get skill critical hit, you get firearm penetration, firearm critical hit rate. You become a little bit slower, but you also get a bunch of other bonuses such as skill crit damage as well as firearm critical hit damage. So you just get real stacked up. Now, if you end up rolling or grappling, you end up losing some of the stacks. For the fourth ability, we have Descendant, which allows you to turn your weapon into a sniper rifle. Now, I did definitely check if the explosive damage would work, but this is specifically firearm damage. And then there's another number that is additional damage that comes from the skill power. Now, this works out well, even if you're using the gun build, because you can utilize it in order to get that MP recovery from hitting those weak points. And we'll wrap it up with the passive. When you are 25 meters or more, you start to get an increase or decrease in your weak point damage. You'll end up showing the icon and it'll end up like highlighting a bit more, and you can see how much damage you're getting essentially based off of that. So the general gameplay loop is to press your V, so that way you start stacking up those buffs. And then when you get to those 16 stacks, or when you're about to, you're ready to snipe. Get your Q off so that way you get those damage increases. And hit your big old numbers. Now the gameplay loop for the gun version is just pressing this button right here. And that's literally it. Just turn it on and off sometimes. So below we have a enraged Power Master trying to kill us, right? We're not moving at all. And this is the setup that we actually run in for that. And we have a couple different flex options. As you can see, this is probably one of the most brain dead stacked defense type of builds. Well, stack defenses, not necessarily defense itself, stack mitigation, I guess would be the correct word. So all we have right here, increase HP, stim accelerant. You can swap this out with the one that reduces the shield if you want to, if you feel like you need a little bit more MP. Time distribution, because the cooldown helps out our V a little bit, but for the most part we don't need cooldown at all. We're just taking this for the extra HP. Shot focus, of course, to add some extra damage. Auto immunity, which is fantastic to get that damage reduction. And then we start adding some more resistances. So we get this 4,614 on top of what we have on top of our good old external component. And then we have the heat release, which is going to give us that burn immunity, which is a pretty big dot, as well as fire resistance. Maximize conservation, since we don't care about the modifier. We don't care about the modifier in general because the modifier is so insanely high with this character, but we care about it even less due to the fact that we are rocking a good old gun-oriented build. So you saw how brain dead tanky the setup is with the max resistances. What you can also do is you can just turn off these polarities, and that will allow you to go ahead and slot in whatever resistance that you need for that particular fight. So you don't have to deal with being frozen. Have this maxed out and swap that out accordingly due to whatever you're doing at the moment. What I end up running a majority of the time, since it has so much bulk in it, is this combination right here Now, what conditional recharge does is when you utilize a skill, you remove 10 of your HP and you recover a little bit of the max shield, which really isn't that important of a thing right now. So pretty much you're turning Hailey into Gley essentially, and what you're utilizing this for is to proc Walk a Tightrope, so that way you're able to get your HP low enough to not only pop Annihilation, but also Walk a Tightrope. So this is going to be a big damage increase for you overall. If you were to max out your conditional recharge, you'd be draining 17.5% of your HP each time you toggle this on and off. I would rather have it at this level so that way you're just draining 10, because there are going to be opportunities where you want to go ahead and turn it off so you can move a little bit faster or move around. So this build utilizes 9 catalysts. Now with the update, we can end up catalyzing the polarity slots a little bit more and getting a bit more value out of them. So of course we go ahead and catalyze the auto immunity so that way we lower down that cost. And from there, I would start looking at the increased defense. Once the increased defense is maxed out, you end up getting about 10% damage reduction on the Annihilation variation of this build. But with the bosses and how they end up working, some attacks are elemental as well as physical, such as the Flamethrower from the Pyromancer, which seems a little bit odd, while some enemies, such as the Deadbriar, when they do the bubble, it bypasses some level of your defense. You can kind of adjust to that a little later on and try to figure out what works out a little bit better for you. Overall, the build is extremely tanky regardless, and you're not going to just be standing there taking hits. You can jump around and, you know, move, be a little bit mobile. An option that would be good would be to swap out the R and add the X over here for safe recovery. You're still getting some level of damage mitigation, while at the same time you're getting HP heal 17%, and that is a good sizable amount. Now this will end up increasing the amount of HP that you get back from the drops that are on the ground. So you stack this with a reactor that has HP heal on it, because there's pretty much nothing else to get on the reactor for this build, and you will be healing a sizable amount. So the start of the show for the build is actually the Enduring Legacy. Right here we have the critical hit rate, critical hit damage, firearm attack versus Colossus, and firearm attack. The critical hit rate, I will go ahead and swap this out with the fire attack, the element itself. Maybe weak point damage. I do like leaning further into the crit with the Enduring Legacy, because those critical hits allow you to burst bubbles faster, burst vials faster, due to those not having weak points at all. And then, yeah, the fire attack is going to be very solid because it also multiplies with your crit. So Enduring Legacy is really just the start of the show. Right here we are running 2 rounds per magazine, so that way we end up being at 205. This works super well with Sharp Precision Shot, because Sharp Precision Shot scales pretty much with duration, and with us having more ammunition, we're going to be shooting for longer. So something you can play around with is fire priority. This works out pretty well for this gun due to it being a fire-oriented gun. I'm not too big of a fan of the reload time modifier. I did mess around with it a little bit, and the setup that I have currently felt a bit better for me. Next, you need a mobbing gun, and then a gun that you can utilize in order to get some more ammo. So the gun that we're utilizing for more ammo, ironically, is also a really good mobbing gun, which is the Thunder Cage. But we're using Greg's as our mobbing gun. So this is what we're running right here. Now, due to the changes, I'll go ahead and swap this out to a electric element or a fire element. But this overall setup still works very, very well. And these are our rolls for the Greg's Reverse Fate. And then for the Thunder Cage, we put on Expand General Magazine, Normal Impact Rounds Refining, which is going to allow us to pick up that green ammo and convert that over to good old General. And then we have the General Rounds Compulsive, which is just going to allow us to hold more and more rounds. So the issue that I ran into with this build, and you'll see inside of the video that comes up, is that you just run out of ammo. So you start with 400, and then since you have 205 bullets, you end up running through your whole inventory in 2 clips, essentially. And this combination ends up fixing that. So when you do see that green ammo, you swap over to the Thunder Cage, run over, and you end up picking up that extra ammo. So for this setup, the reactor really doesn't mean anything so for the substats. So you can get the skill cost reduction. This is only going to be a very small reduction to the skill cost. So skill cost reduction, HP modifier, and cooldown are the things they can utilize. The cooldown is really just so you can spam the V a little bit more often at the beginning, while the other 2 are going to be things that are going to end up helping you a bit more. Skill cost is probably the highest priority out of those, but it's not a big reduction overall. So for the external components, there are a couple different sets that you can run. let's talk about the substats first for these. So max HP, fire resistance are the rolls that you want. For the sensor is going to be max MP, MP recovery in combat, or you can go with chill resistance. Max MP and chill resistance is going to be more than enough because you're able to regen your MP by utilizing your ultimate, and you have enough skill cost reduction inside of your build as well as inside the inversion reinforcement, which we'll talk about in a second, that ends up covering everything that you need. So for the annihilation memory, defense as well as electric resistance is fantastic. And then we have toxin resistance, and then you can just find something else for the processor because most of the processor substats are not that great. Having extra shield could be okay with the max shield, but it's not the craziest thing inside the world. Acrobat is nice because you're able to get your critical hit rate up to 100%. Which you will see pop up in uno segundo. So I ended up hitting, my keyboard a few times to crunch some numbers for Acrobat, Veterans, and Annihilation. Annihilation and Veterans ended up being ahead of Acrobat during the math, but when I tested it in game, the Annihilation set as well as the Acrobat set were essentially the same thing. So if you want more bulk, I would go the Annihilation set, but if you want more bulk and want to be able to dodge Eugen, I would go with the Veteran set. Veteran set is the nice little in-between and get a little bit of extra effective HP. So the inversion reinforcements, I thought was going to be something like kind of crazy, but it ends up being some pretty minor buffs. So the things that we ended up running inside of this area over here, the chill resistance is pretty good because sometimes you're not going to be able to run the chill resistance on your external component because you want to get that MP recovery in combat as well as that max MP more importantly. But once you have these filled out, you end up getting this bonus right here, which is an additional 10% all attribute resistance, which is pretty solid. So you can run this and this in tandem. Another cool thing they can run is Arch Pacemaker. So when you end up pressing your V, you will get that 20% skill cost reduction, which is pretty good. Essentially for free. You do lose a little bit of fire rate, but the skill effect range doesn't really affect anything. Another person that this works well on is Gley. So you have a couple options they can play around with, but this is my inversion reinforcement setup. This is also huge too. This is going to give you some nice little MP recovery. A little bit of RNG every so often, so it's nice to have that. For turbo farming at the moment, run just good old Piercing Light with weak point, firearm attack, firearm versus Colossus, and crit hit damage. Where you're doing the same thing where you're lowering your HP, utilizing conditional recharge, and just blasting away to shoot the thing super quick. If you don't like conditional recharge, you can go ahead and increase your HP normally. But this is really just for solo play. I would not do this in group play at all. I'm just running around with the gun setup in group play. So while this works well with Annihilation, if you did want to run the Slayer set, which is quality, you want to go ahead and put on Dangerous Ambush. And at that point, we go with the increased HP. And if you want a little bit more HP inside of group play, you can just run increased HP and swap out shot focus with another HP modifier. That way you have a little bit more bulk to it. So Slayer would be the combination with that, or you could run something like 2 Polar Knight, 2 Acrobat. So this will give you less immediate power, but what they end up doing is end up giving you some more HP to play around with if you feel like you're too squishy. And I would catalyze the Spear and Shield to a C, and I would keep shot focus because when your cooldowns are down, you're just using Enduring Legacy, and Enduring Legacy does a ton of damage, which we have seen already. So ideally, I would catalyze this R into a C. We can check how much HP we get. We had almost 21k. Run this setup right here with the double. And this could be a kind of a bulkier version for the group play. Cooldown doesn't really do too much in this situation. I did play around with cooldown and multi-talented, but then I remembered that I had a gun that I could just shoot when stuff was on cooldown, so that didn't really help out too much. But your Piercing Light This is what I have. Unfortunately, it's tech, or else this would be a pretty solid one. So as you can see, I'm pressing V to try and lower my HP. We took the burn immunity because the dot from fire actually hurts a lot. That'll be the main thing that kills you. So now I'm just going to hold this down so I can get up to the 16 stacks. And I am not managing the distance well, so I'm not going to get as much weak point damage as I should be able to get. He's also walking towards me, which doesn't help. So we actually have a gamer. Like, somebody is actually on the boss right now. They could have held on to it for a little bit longer. Doing a good old mechanic, so that somebody was to the right, one over to the left. Go shoot him so I can go ahead and get some ammo. See that's green, swap. I was able to pick up a whole lot of ammo off of that green. Not too worried about doing the good old molten balls. Now I'm just getting prepped, ready to blast again. Not really a fantastic angle, but it's something. And an easy melt.